I've been having quite a few squeaks and rattles from this trim piece right here, especially now that it's gotten cold outside up here in Minnesota. So going to remove this and put some felt tape on the back of it, hopefully fix that. It's a pretty easy process to remove this trim piece. I'm going to start by removing this lower cover right here, followed by the trim piece. But to start, need to move the steering wheel down as far as it will go, and back towards the driver as far as it will go to give space. First step is going to be to remove this trim piece. Do that by grabbing under each side with the fingers. And pulling out. Do this without blocking the camera. Now that this has been popped out, just go ahead and pull back. It is attached to this fabric and vinyl cover. Just pull it back, set it aside. We've exposed the bottom of the gauge cluster surround trim piece and can pop that out. The service manual recommends using this trim tool. I'm sure there are some others that would fit in there to work your way around and pop the trim piece off. There are going to be 5 clips, one right here, one right here, one right here, one here, and one here. So you work your way around starting at the bottom. Now the bottom's out, gently work it out with your hands, and the trim piece is free. Now that the trim piece is off, got it over on the bench, and as you can see, there's already one layer of fabric tape right here, but that appears to be the only place that Audi put one. I'm not entirely certain where this is rubbing. There are also some rubber feet here around the clips. I'm assuming that is also supposed to help dampen the vibrations, but it's been creaking and rattling quite badly. So we're going to try adding some extra tape. I have 2 types. I have this super thin cloth wire harness tape, and then I also have this self-adhesive 1mm felt tape. Taking a closer look at the trim piece back in the car, it looks like the areas that are probably the culprits are where these edges sit up against the dash and up against the gauge cluster itself. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try putting some of the felt tape on these seams most of the way around, or at least some pads. Looking a little bit closer, this is made out of 2 different pieces of plastic, so the main frame and the decorative piece. And if you look, there's actually a gap right here. The 2 pieces appear to have been plastic welded together, so they don't come apart. But you can see that they did put tiny pads between the 2 pieces to help with some of that damping. I might go and put a little bit extra of the felt tape, some pads in here as well, just to help, because I'm not certain where the noise is coming from, but there is a bit of creaking that can come from this piece itself. After looking a little bit closer, I'm going to try and take care of 2 things at once, and instead of trying to run any kind of piece of tape all the way across this inner trim piece that contacts the gauge cluster, I'm going to put the little foam pads in between these 2 sections and then wrap them up ever so slightly on this piece of plastic. That way it gives me some pads around to help dampen anything against the gauge cluster, and gets a little more padding between these 2 pieces in case that is one of the sources of rattle. Looking at it, there's no way that I'm going to be able to fit that piece of felt between the gap here on the sides, but because there's just not enough room, but there is definitely room on the top and bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and do those. You definitely want to be looking to make sure that none of the felt sticks out past here so that it will be visible. As you can see, none of those pieces of felt are visible right now, which is great. So now we're going to move on to putting some pieces of felt on the outer section here. Again, we're trying to keep this right along the edge here so it won't be visible. It's pretty dark in the camera, so I apologize if it's hard to see, but I've got it running right along this line here and then fold it over inside the trim piece. I'm going to go ahead and use a trim tool just to help tuck this in place and make sure it is well secured. With these pieces in place, I think I'm going to go put a couple more pieces in, not wrapping this entire curve, but I am going to put a strip here, and a strip here, here, and here. I think I'm also going to take a couple small pieces of this wire harness tape and put it right along the edges here where I couldn't get the felt, just to reduce the amount of area that is plastic on plastic. And again, just trying to make sure that none of this is visible from the driver's view when it's installed. I'm also going to put a little bit on this piece of plastic back here that contacts the last trim piece above the steering wheel. Putting it on and then making sure that a little bit wraps around. And lastly, I'm going to put a little bit of the wire harness tape in the areas where the trim piece that took off first, right above the steering wheel, contacts this bezel. There is a little bit of a lip, so as long as I stay about 2 millimeters, or within about 2 millimeters of this flat surface, it should not be visible. There we go. That should be enough to get rid of all of the squeaks and rattles. Going to go ahead and get it reinstalled and see how things go. As you can see, these are pretty subtle and you cannot see any of them from the driver's view once it is reinstalled. Installation is the exact opposite of removal. Going to put the trim piece back in here. Start snapping from the top. And then the bottom, make sure everything is seated well. It is definitely a lot quieter when I wiggle it. So fingers crossed that noise goes away. And finally, I'm going to put this back in. There are these little flaps of vinyl here. Before I set it or clip it in place, I'm going to go ahead and tuck those. Those tucked, so go ahead and snap that piece back into place. Clean up these little flaps. And we are good to go. That'll do it for this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe, and I will have affiliate links in the description for the products that I used in this video. I have at least one more video coming out here in the not too distant future, and that will be replacing the battery in my 2021 A6 Allroad. It is a much bigger procedure than I had ever expected, so hopefully that video will be helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.